Hey, I like this.
Let me get rid of this. Good morning, good morning.
Good
I'm like, yo,
Dad.
let me get this out. Happy Monday.
Thank you to you too. How are you?
This is literally my favorite track in the morning.
Oh, it's
And,
so good.
and like before, when the office was open, I would get out, hit play. Jay-Z's in the back. I'm getting dressed. I'm like, let's go. And then now that I'm back at work, COVID's eased up. Back into it. And truthfully, between you and me, you know, I love sofa sessions, but I don't understand the language and 99% of the content. So my head is so full of Bollywood that I'm just like, man, I gotta get back. I gotta get back to English.
Oh gosh.
You ever feel like that?
What do you speak Tamil? What do you speak primarily?
Tamil fluently. Okay. But most of the Tamil songs that I knew is like for me it's like it's the new trap sound. I don't like it as much either. You know, it's very, very harsh, very, very like fast, and I like my 80s and 90s. And as soon as you play it, you know, you're like, man, I feel old. Another Ilayaraja song, another SB song. I'm like, where's all the new like hip hop, EDM, Tamil style? So anyhow, so I go back to what makes me happy. Hip hop. My go-to playlist is the Black Album. First thing in the morning, if I can get a little.
I love that. I love that.
Change clothes is like a big tune. Have you ever gotten just sick of music, where you're like, I need to just not listen to anything?
Totally. I mean, so I never. This is as a musician, right? I've never worked while listening to music. Like even if I'm sending emails and things, it's just because I get so distracted by it.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but you know, you do need that time to listen. So I've been, I'm currently finishing up my master's program at Berkeley, and so I've been trying to listen to music while doing that. But it distracts me so much. Like yesterday, I remember I was listening to some Ben Platt and some like R&B soul vibes, and after a while I was like, I cannot listen to anything anymore. I just need silence because my brain is building up. I think for those of us who are musical, right, at least for me, my brain is constantly building up harmonies and parts and like studying it without me even knowing it.
Yeah, 100%.
So I'm just like, it's on overload. I can't do this anymore right now.
100%, man. I used to do the same where like Mixcloud was my go-to because I wanted to hear other DJs do mixing.
Yeah.
But then halfway through, I'm listening to their mixes and their cuts that I don't even pay attention to, like what I was working on. And I was like, no,
Exactly.
I got Spotify because now the DJs are getting me hooked, you know. But how are you? Are you still in India? Where are you? What's going on?
I am. I'm still in Bombay. I'll probably be here honestly till the end of the year, given this world situation. Yeah, but I'm grateful to be here with family, and it's been good. I've been working on a ton of new stuff, so I can't wait for you to hear some stuff that's coming out soon.
Okay.
Just shot my first music video in lockdown with director on Zoom and all that. So that was
you were literally like, look at my makeup coming off my face.
It's like I've not worn this much makeup in years. Well, not years, but months at least, given this whole situation. Oh my God. But no, very grateful. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, I'm doing that dual degree at Harvard and Berkeley, so finishing up the master's. So it's been good. It's just been hard to balance everything because you know how it is when music projects come in, they don't stop. Like they come in and they all happen at the same time. And I'm like, okay, I have to record for this, write for this, do for this. And I'm like, wait, where am I going to do what I need to do?
When does school end for you?
So the master's program will end next June, but I'm not concerned. It's been like, I've been in school for so many years now, right? 15 years or whatever it is, right after high school, college, and now this. So I know how to do school. It's just factoring it into everything else going on. Like
all the other stuff that gets added.
Exactly. It's just like this weekend, for example, on Saturday, we were shooting for 9 hours straight. And then I had to write 2 essays, and then I had a show in Boston, but it was 4:30 a.m. my time. So I was debating whether I should nap or whether I should like stay out. So that's the biggest debate of my life right now. You know?
Yeah. Can you squeeze in food and nap? No, that's
amazing. Exactly.
It's what, 6 a.m. for you? No, it's like, what time is it for you?
Right now it's 6:30 p.m.
PM.
Yeah. So it's your morning. I'm settling into the evening.
Man, well, listen, thank you for making some time for me.
I see
a lot of familiar faces. So this whole thing, that's just to sort of give you a backdrop on where we're gonna focus on today.
Yes.
Some of it is music, but most of it is around what happens around music. And so I've been working on a book for over a year now, and I'm a talker more than a writer. And so when I got stuck, I was like, man, how do I fill out the next 5 or 10 chapters, which is
Yeah.
all about hustle and breaking your own identity issues and understanding how to get inspired and how do you get up when you get knocked out. So then I was like, all right, what if I just started talking to people that I follow that are displaying a lot of the characteristics that I love, and then in conversations we can pull out some nuggets, and then that turns into my chapters. So
I
every
love.
single week for 5 days, I pick a chapter and then I talk about it with amazing folks. And then on the weekend, I nerd out on like how to turn it into a chapter.
I
Um,
love.
and along the way, there's been so many knowledge bombs. I think I have like 3 books in me already. It's crazy. Um, so I know a lot of your fans are coming and some of my folks are there, but let's take 30 seconds and like you do your MC intro. Like do the ta-da.
Ta-da! Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Avanti Nagral. I'm a singer, songwriter, and artist based between Bombay and Boston, or more specifically between the U.S. and India. My music is in the, I would say, pop soul space, and I sing in multiple languages. A lot of my released music thus far has been in the English space, but stay tuned for some other surprises very soon. And I've performed at venues across the U.S., India, Southeast Asia. I also am doing a dual degree at Harvard and the Berklee College of Music, and I'll actually be the first in the world to graduate from that program. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, that's basically it. I'm just here to help make y'all feel, and through that, if we can provide some joy into this world, that would be incredible.
Amazing. So hopefully some of the things I want to dive into are not things you've talked about with people already, because I've seen some of your
Perfect.
interviews and you're fantastic and explain what's going on in your life. So the conversations around like self-awareness is really important to me. So many young people that I meet just don't have the same hand-me-down life that I grew up with. Like it was easy. I'm 45. When I was 15, it's like, hey man, you're gonna be this, a doctor, engineer.
Yeah.
Get that option. My parents were like, you're gonna be a doctor? No way. Like, can you try to be an accountant? But so much of like my generation was hand-me-down book of like what life should be, and then if you didn't follow it, they either hate you or they don't. But I find this generation has a lot more opportunities, and it's not the same kind of rules,
Totally.
right? So let's start with like your awareness. When did you start to pay attention to the little voice that said, "Man, I got another person in me that's creative," or was it always encouraged? Or let's start with awareness. When did you start to pay attention to yourself?
I mean, I think there's a long answer to that, so I want to set some context. First, I, I was born in the U.S. and I moved to India when I was about nine years old. And when I moved, when I was born in the U.S., my parents had immigrated there 20-something years before, and they were handed that book, right, like you were saying, in the same way. But they chose certain paths which were groundbreaking for them at the time. My dad, instead of, even though he studied to be an engineer, is an entrepreneur in the tech space. My mom, she entered in the fashion world and then went into early. She's done like 10,000 things at early education. Now she does, life coaching. And seeing the fact that they were able to move to another country and build a life, right, for their future generations, for me and my brother, so successfully, and at the same time be able to go back to India and build something successfully for themselves there, as they call it, their version 2.0. My dad grew up pretty middle class, and his version 2.0 in India is very different from the way in which he grew up. Wow. And seeing that life that he and my mom have built is incredible. And my brother and I are such we're so grateful and so in awe of that, right? And I think there's this saying where it's like I don't think I don't know where it came from, but I personally don't think your parents or the generation before you goes through struggles for you to just walk through life, right? They build something for you. They build a platform for you, a safety net, whatever it might be, for you to then take even bigger risks, whatever that means, right? That may be professionally, that may be personally, that may be just in your mindset and keeping an open mind. But I know what they did and the way in which they built was so that we could have opportunity. So I knew from the get-go, right? For example, education was very important to my family. My grandfather is the only one of his siblings who's literate. The rest of his siblings are still in the village, illiterate. Many have passed away, and he grew up all the way to be a doctor. So to see that transformation, I knew that I have it kind of in my bloodline. So I knew education was really important, right? And that was a huge bedrock of our family. So that became as an important aspiration for me to have. But within that educational experience, I think, I recognized that there were many other parts to me that I enjoyed, like you said, the creative side. When I grew up in the US, my mom's pretty spiritual, so I started doing a lot of devotional music and things like that. And then when I moved to India, I started training in Indian classical and a lot of musical pursuits. I did some professional theater and things like that. For me, I knew.
How did you know music was your thing and not like drawing or sculpting or dancing?
I think it was funny. I think I knew that at a very young age. A typical immigrant mindset. My parents, when I was really little, put me into like 10 different things. I was an ice skater. I was like, did gymnastics. I did dance, so awesome. Everything, And my parents tell me this story. They say when I was about 6 years old, I go to them, very profound, just like they're watching TV, and I go to them and I'm like, guys, I choose music. And they're like, what? As a 6 or 7 year old, how in the world are you supposed to know? But apparently I knew. I mean, other things were useful in that. For example, I played town soccer as a little kid.
Can we talk about that for one more second? Because so many of us shut down that little voice.
Yes.
Like you, like when I was very early, I didn't know what the job was, but I would get these vivid dreams of like being on stages and holding something in my hand, and like I see silhouettes of people, and we come from a very conservative home, so I never understood what was it that I was dreaming. It wasn't like I was watching a concert on TV the night before and it was in my dreams, right? I would have these vivid dreams, like, and then I would get up fully confused because there's no frame of reference. And then fast forward, I'm like, man, I imagined, being on stage and connecting with people and all of that kind of stuff at such a very early age, and I never forgot it, which was awesome. But so many of us like ignore the little insights much early in life. How did you start?
Totally. I mean, I think I'm very grateful that my parents listened to that voice, right? So I remember when I was 5 years old, I played the piano at that time, and they bought me a piano, which I still have today. That piano.
Go get it. I'm just kidding. Bring the camera up there. We're gonna finish off with the 9-year-old version of you singing.
It's crazy because that much faith. I mean, at that time they were struggling, right? Like they could have used that for so many other things, to buy a car, to whatever, but they believed in whatever that dream was, right? In any capacity. And I mean, it isn't to say that they were like, oh, she says music at 5, so she should be a musician. Not at all, right? It was like, make sure you study hard, good grades, like get into a good college, because that was still a pathway to success, which was known.
And it made sense. Yeah.
But at the same time, allowing that expression and that space. So that, I agree with you that it's important to listen to those voices. So I think that was an early voice. I think growing up a little bit more when I moved to India, I would say early tween years, right? So between the ages of like 8 and 12, I faced a lot of bullying, which is pretty standard. It's sad that it's standard for a lot of folks, but it is. But I think for me, it ended up happening much earlier. The kinds of things that happened to me were at a much earlier stage than usually happens to folks in high school, right? And when you're 9 and 10 years old and you
don't get it.
Backstabbing, bitching, it was pretty brutal. Like it ended in this situation where this guy, I was 11 years old, and he chased me around a room with a saw. Like it got to an extreme,
like
to
Jason
the point
saw, like
an actual saw. Well, to give you context, this was a class. It was like a design technology class. I don't know why we had that kind of class, but it was like where you could cut stuff and make stuff, right? But the teacher stepped out to go get me a special saw or something like that. And this kid got really jealous because he wanted the special saw, and chaos ensued, whatever it is. And I think the things that, that got me through that were knowing that there's a capacity to have kindness for people, and you can show that in multiple different ways, right? I think those types of experiences can force you into becoming very shy or very inward or very toward yourself. But I think what it caused me to do is go very outward. If I felt pain, I would see other people who were experiencing pain, and I would want to help them naturally in whatever way that meant, right? And I saw, the power of art as that being one healing aspect of that. I saw the power of just music or poetry or dance or any of these things being that healing tool, as well as just being a kind person yourself and knowing what someone's energy can do, right? So I think that was a middle stage piece.
Wow, and we haven't even got past into your teenage days yet.
No.
This is like under 10 with such good insights. At what point does because this is pre-social media, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm sure you're not meditating and all sorts of stuff. As these things are coming into your head, are you journaling? How are you managing emotions at such an young age?
I think at that time I was also singing, right? And I was, whether it was classical music or whatever, to me that was my release personally. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there were times at which I really didn't want to, and my parents were like, no, you have to practice, because they were very much like, I think it's the typical mindset, you said you want to do this, so commit to it,
Yeah, exactly.
And I appreciated that. So that was my outlet. I think the other thing which was useful was having open, my parents have always been pretty open and supportive, so I knew that I could go to them with things.
Right.
There were obviously some things that I couldn't, and the older I grew, the more that relationship built. But it was never we are this unaccessible, generation. I think my in psychology, there's multiple types of parenting, right? And there's a style called authoritative parenting, where you are very strict, but you are also very involved with your child, and you know what's going on.
Sounds like I think my kids. I know. Bro, it's a challenge. I already love your parents. I want to have them on the podcast too. And
yeah.
There's no, all the books I've read, movies I've watched, How to Be a Parent, How to Be an Indian Dad. Nothing prepares you, man, when that little human comes in. You're like, I don't know. What do you want to do?
Parenting seems like the hardest job in the world, and I have so much respect for folks.
Yeah, and we have such limited time. Like, by the time my daughter was 11, she's already like, I'm good. I don't need you. I'm like, I had 11 years of influence. What the hell? The rest of the time I'm playing catch up. What do you think about this word purpose? There's a pressure to figure out your purpose. Yes. And I have a different idea around it. But, if somebody was like, what's your purpose? Do you have an answer? You're working on it? How do you feel about it?
I do actually have an answer. And that kind of comes a little later in my, I guess, life timeline. But I'll share it now. So, as I mentioned before, my grandfather is a doctor. In fact, all my grandparents were doctors. And, Indian girl, so you might expect that. And but I've had a lot of health issues through my life. I was born with a hole in my heart, and they didn't know if I was gonna survive after a few years. And then how in our communities we believe that certain things bring good luck. So when my brother was born, I was 4 when he was born. It actually naturally closed up on its own. And so it's like my good luck charm. Yeah, otherwise I would have had to go through, this 10 surgery process. It was crazy. It was insane. My parents were very grateful.
Wow. You can never say no to a favor from him.
No, you cannot.
He's like, hey man, I healed your heart. Like, I need your heart.
Yeah, it's like, yo. And then there were several other, still major but more minor in comparison issues. And then when I was about 15, I woke up one day and I couldn't see with my left eye. And it was pretty scary. I already had a very high power. Like my eyesight at the time was near legally blind in any case, but it was just pitch black. And I remember it was a scary time because, of course, I was immediately rushed to the hospital. They tried to figure out what it was. They couldn't really diagnose it. And the thing that they found was that it was essentially a brain virus that had demyelinated my optic nerve tissue. What that means in a non-scientific context is there's a virus, and all of our neurons have a coating around it called the myelin sheath. It's kind of like a wire. So that had been essentially eroded, and therefore my connections were not as strong, and my vision had become, I essentially lost vision in the eye. Fortunately, that also meant that it could progressively come back, and it took a while of recovery, But there were 3 things that happened during that time. One is, as I mentioned, the parallel narrative to this is very much be a good student, do this, blah, blah, blah. So I think a lot of my identity was prided in being a good, intellectual academic student, along with, you know, being an all-rounder.
Right.
And after this, because it was a brain virus, I couldn't remember much. And I remember not being able to, like, obsessively looking at a history textbook, not remembering anything, trying to do math, not remembering anything. And of course, it took resilience to build that back. But I was like, wow, that part of my identity is not necessarily the strongest. So who am I as a person? The other thing that got me through that was music, right? Both listening and for myself. And again, that same recurring theme of music as a healing tool. But I think I was older and wiser at the time, and I said, if this is healing for me, I know it can be healing for so many other folks. And I saw music not just as this medium of expression within itself, but also as a vehicle to create change. I knew that if I ever had the ability to have a platform as a result of my voice, right? Like I strongly believe that these things are gifts, whether you believe in God or not, or whatever it might be. There's a reason, and I never wanted to live with regret. So for me, I think that was a turning point in seeing music as something beyond just this side hobby or this side hustle or this passion, but as something that I wanted to manifest later, and I didn't know what that was. And there's like more nodes along the point which I can share, but because you asked about purpose, I would say my purpose was always driven by the fact that I had all of these health issues, but I had access to quality care, right? I had access in a way that many folks don't. So my purpose has always been driven by how do you bridge that inequity in basic things like health or education? How do you bridge that inequity in empowering women who I'm said woman who's 22 years old. Another said woman who's 22 years old has a very different life experience.
100%.
How do you use your voice as somebody who's been given privileges in life and an empowered stance on the world to help uplift, right? How do you talk about things like sexual health and mental health, especially in our communities, which are extremely taboo? So to me, my purpose is driven by being able to use my voice in its multiplicity of forms.
Right.
And to me, if I feel like I'm doing that, then I feel like my purpose is being served.
That is such a great answer. Have we hit your teenage years yet? We haven't.
Yeah, we're early teens. We're in early teens. Yeah.
I'm so fascinated on how you put your thoughts together. One of the correlations I try to connect with people, actually, just if I would add my 2 cents into like why I do the things I do, I think similar to you, I had some very traumatizing early days where, like, you know, from Singapore, I was born in South India, but I think I told you I moved to Singapore when I was 3. And my parents, I'm the eldest son of a large clan. Like, my dad's the oldest of 14 siblings, and my mom's got like the 12. Wow. It's like, they had no TV back then, so there were people who were just born. You're like the oldest, and there's an expectation to be academically strong, and then I happen to have the 1% strain and some lineage that is creative. So I was born, I was like, I don't get school, man. Like, you know, I'll do it if somebody tells me what's the point. And I've always asked this what's the point question in my head. And from 3 to 15, I was literally labeled dumb and stupid by a small country. And then as soon as like your oldest son is labeled dumb and stupid, the ripple effects are crazy. Like, I went for most of my young years not even having a conversation with my dad because he would not talk to me. We would walk side by side and he would not say a word. And so most of my life I was like living in my head going, something doesn't make sense. And it's when I came to Canada, very quickly people are saying other things about me, like you're charismatic and you've got, you know, a great personality and you can do this and this and this. And I'm like, wait a second, all I did was get on a plane 12 hours ago. How can this person be completely different than the other person, where I haven't done anything of significant to change? And that created this tiny little crack that I've spent the next 25 years life hacking. And I literally have a blueprint on like how to change your mindset. And for me, that's the purpose. How many different people that come across in my line of whatever I do path that I can shift a tiny bit of your gears, and the opportunities that you think are not there triples or 10x's with a tiny little shift. And sometimes these shifts are so small, we don't even understand how easy it is to happen. And that's why these kind of conversations are great, because somebody's going to hear one line from you, one line from me, and like their life would dramatically change, which is really exciting for me. But when I became aware of that, the actions to become that person wasn't that easy. right?
Hmm.
When you're like, okay, music is my hobby, I've now figured out that's my purpose, and I want to use it as a voice. Talk to me on the actions you started to take. At what
Yeah.
point you start to think like an artist, get a team around you, start working on content. What was that like?
So that's a great question. I think, and thank you for sharing because that's a beautiful purpose. I mean, we've only known each other a short while, but you are somebody who clearly builds community around you where you go. And it's amazing to see the number of folks who you've uplifted, right?
Yeah.
And you're always at the cutting edge. So it's beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing
Imagine
that.
if I know Hindi. Whoo, watch out, India. One day, I will be the voice of India. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Okay, so you're asking me when I took that action, right? So I mentioned to my mid-teen years, right?
Yeah.
Flash forward to when I was about 18. At this point, I had graduated from high school. Like I mentioned, at that point, the thing for me, what you were saying about school, what's the purpose? For me, I understood the point of school as this safety net for me. I enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong. I quite enjoyed learning and I quite enjoyed the academic grind. And if anybody who met me in my early high school days would have probably labeled me as a goody two shoes or something, like somebody who's like very academically strong, etc. But I said, okay, I've gotten into this great college, right? I've gotten into one of the top schools in the world. What does that mean for me as a person? Is that going to be my only identity? And what about this other thing that's constantly gnawing at me? This thing of pursuing my creative passion in a larger sense. So I got into Harvard early. This was December 2014. And I remember sitting my parents down and being like, hey, so I'm going to take the next year off. And they're like, what? What does that mean? And it was so funny because taking a gap year, right? And the nature of this was very much, I basically told Harvard, hey, I want to come next year. And they were very chill with it. And most people in India, it was funny because that was just not a very dumb thing at the time. They're like,
yeah, what the hell's a gap year? Nobody told me.
Like, what is a gap year? Yeah,
I would have taken a gap year. My gap year was like, I need to drop out because there's no, I have to either finish my degree or drop out. Nobody told me gap years.
There was that you had that space, and I was like, look, I'm just turning 18. This is the only time in my life that I will have, which is very responsibility free, and why can't I pursue what I want to? So a few things fell into place for me. One is I mentioned to you I was doing some professional theater. I had been offered the lead role in this show called Agnes of God, which is a 1982 Broadway show that they were bringing to India. I was playing Agnes, and I can talk about that because that taught me a lot, and I definitely wanted to mention it. So I was like, okay, great. I have this thing that I can use to tell society that this is one thing that I'm doing. The other thing is I was doing some research in the global health space. So my parents were like, oh, that's great. We can tell people that she's doing a fellowship. I'm like, great. Whatever you need to tell people, you can tell people. Like, that's fine by me, so long as you're chill with my decision. Honestly, I feel like
that is so funny, man. Like, oh my gosh, it is. It's funny. Like when I first started Lazy Fast, just a quick pause. My parents hated it, especially my dad, because he was like, I didn't come all the way from Canada for you to be a clown on stage, making people laugh. Well, in my head, I'm building a community, and for the longest time, even when people saw the commercials, people would be like, "Oh, your son is Lazy." And he's like, "Yeah, he's just volunteering." I'm like, "What are you telling people, man?" Anyhow, it was just funny when you said
no. But to your point, it's all about framing.
Yeah.
It's all about framing. Like at the time, I kid you not, it was almost like I had a business plan. I was like, so this is what I'm thinking of doing. These are some opportunities. No, because you have to, what I found is in this creative space, especially with our communities, right, where it's just not as normative, you have to professionalize it. 100%. And you have to show that there's so multiple options, right? In fact, I'm pivoting a little bit, but I'll come back to this stage. I remember literally a year and a half ago, I was having dinner with my parents, my brother, and a close friend of mine who is non-Indian. I'm sitting there, and my parents are like, so Avanti, what do we call you? I was like, what does that mean? You named me. What do you mean, what do you call me? Like, baby, Avanti, like, whatever. I'm like, no. What do we tell people you are? Like, how do we describe it? And I was like, why do you ask? I'm like, well, thus far, for the past couple of years, we've been able to say, oh, she's at Harvard, she's in college, she's a college student, and she's doing whatever. But that time is running out soon. And, you're going to be doing this and we won't really have an answer for people. And I was like, okay, you know what? Let's talk about it. So we ran through the options. We said singer. Now, that is true. However, the connotation of singer is still not as well understood unless you are, you know, like a famous Bollywood singer or a famous, you know, whatever. So that would have had some negative connotations. So I was like, okay, maybe you could say professional singer if that helps people. And they're like, no, that still won't help. I'm like, okay, let's talk about it. And then I mentioned, I mean, they know all the other things I do, right? I do a lot of stuff still in the global health space, in the space. So I'm like, you know what? This is what we can call it. I'm an entrepreneur and an artist, but that's not going to really understand people. You can't say she's an artist and entrepreneur. They'll be like, whatever. So we came up with the title media entrepreneur.
Media.
It's like, media entrepreneur, because it's true, but it's still vague enough and sounds sexy enough for people to be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. You know? So like whatever floats your boat, whatever you want to tell people.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's important, man, because like, look, I looked at my daughter. She's 12. She's okay in school, but she can memorize a song like this and rap on it. I don't know if that's, you know, gonna go any far. She's got a secret TikTok account we discovered with over 1,000 videos.
Wow.
The one she showed me had like 4, and I'm like, this is okay. And then she used my phone one time and forgot to log off, and I was like, what is this account? And there was over 1,000 videos, and they were all thought out, art directed, scripted. And I was like, this is cool. Where is this?
Yeah.
And I think as parents, we just don't know how to deal with the breakdown of these normal rules. Like, you're gonna be a lawyer, you're gonna be a this, and as that's all falling down, I'm like, I don't know what to imagine.
Yeah.
You know? And so it's a really interesting time, like, to figure out what's happening. And then even as a musician, like, one of the things I love is, let's get to the theater part. We have a community app that we just launched, and my premise always has been like, people have been like, hey, do you want to manage my career? Can you be a record label? And I find all of those isolated doesn't really connect to help a musician.
Yeah.
At the same time, I feel like there's a bit of a cop out when you're like, I'm a musician, I don't know what to do, versus I'm an entrepreneur and my product is music. Well, all of a sudden, I can tell you 10 things you can do as an entrepreneur. What's your brand?
Exactly.
Your customer? What's your social platform? What's your, like, we can get going, but the shift of like, I'm an entrepreneur that has a music product is much different than I'm a musician. And I feel like you look at yourself as an entrepreneur with a music product.
Totally. I look at myself as equal parts entrepreneur and equal parts artist, and I recognize that isn't, I mean, I think that today, especially if you're an independent musician or whatever it might be, you really have to think of yourself as a startup, right? You are the brand, product, and the entrepreneur.
Say that one more time.
You have to think of yourself as a startup, no matter what creative field you're in. You are the brand,
Boom.
product, and entrepreneur all in one.
That's gonna go viral, hands down. People gotta. It's so different. Like, I was watching Kanye last night on a YouTube video, and he was like, "Look, if it's Travis Scott and the guy who sold Dropbox, financially we're almost the same, and they're both a startup. Why does one have 200 people working and the other guy has got nobody really supporting him? And why can't the Travis go IPO?"
Yeah.
You're right, because he doesn't think of it as a musician. Well, startups get the same funding and the same support, and there are hundreds of people. I was like, it's, you know, and I think that's the future we're trying to help create, to go, hey, your product is music, but it could change. Today you're doing shows, tomorrow you're theater, the day after you're doing sync licensing, then you're doing background music. Like, there's so many things you can do, but you shut all that down the minute you go, I'm an artist, man. I'm an artist. I need a PR person, I need social media. Like, no, you need to have a plan for what you're doing in the music business.
Exactly. And I mean, you do need all those things at some point, but if you don't know, I think a lot of people are like, when they reach even a micro stage, they're very much, they say, oh, I need all these people in my life. You do. I'm not saying you don't, but you need it when you can't do that yourself. When you've outgrown that, or when things are so busy for you that you are not making effective use of your time. That's when you need that.
And what's amazing, what you just said is, after building hundreds of micro companies in my life, that's exactly what I do. I start day one, I get enough customers to hire person 2, and then we triple the business to person 5, and then we add on other people to support the structure of the company. That is business 101, which for me is what your music business is.
Totally. And I think it's important to, the same way in which when you run a company, right, whatever your product is, no matter what it is, you know you may not be the best person to develop the product, right? Like with Applause, for example, you may not know all the coding and the algorithmic framework or that's not into it, but you understand the product and the need for it. You understand the market gap. You understand all of these pieces. And that's so important. Like, how can you hire somebody to do PR for you if you don't understand what it takes to reach out to somebody, like what they should even write? It should be, you should reach a stage whereby somebody can send you something, you know exactly what the flaws are, what's good, what's bad, as opposed to you taking their word for it.
Yeah, 100%.
You know?
I want to talk about your habits. I feel like you got great habits in life. I want to like see if we can talk into some of that. So for me, the process personally always has been I got a bunch of goals, and then I'm gonna figure out what habits that I have or don't have that I need to create to complement these new set of goals that I want to achieve. And then my habits will allow me to figure out what my momentum is. What is my velocity? Sometimes, you know, I can tell myself I want to lose 8 pounds, but if I can't commit to healthy eating or get to the gym, I don't care what I say, it's not going to happen. So in your current, you know, level, I'm sure you got some good habits, but take me back like 17, 18, we were just thinking about how do I balance school and music and career and theater. What habits you had to create for yourself that today you look back and you're like, man, thank God I was doing that stuff at 4 a.m. every day.
Yeah, no, honestly, I mean, so let's go back to the school space, right? I think I was very, very committed to knowing how to do school in a way that was not, my life wasn't only school, because I knew that would make me go crazy, right? So, of course, all the standardized testing, everything, that was all extremely important, but I needed to know how to do that. And I've always, I think I discovered this at 16. There's this framework called the Eisenhower Matrix. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Right, I'm writing it down, girl. Keep talking.
Perfect. So it's essentially a 2x2 matrix. I'm going to try to, let's use these, right? So if I don't have 4 posters, but anyway, let's say I was able to double this, right? So I have 2 more stacked here. It's essentially a matrix which you prioritize along the axes of urgency and importance. So the way that works is basically, let's just use one of these and pretend I've, you know, drawn it into 4. Let's say I have urgent, not urgent, important, not important here. What do you think the first box would be?
The combination, first 2, yeah.
The first 2, right? Urgent and important. So that's number 1. So anything that's urgent, I'll give you an example. Like right before coming on this podcast, I really needed to pee. Okay, I know that's a terrible example, but I knew I'd be so stressed if I didn't. And that was both urgent and important for me to give my, you know, all to you. Or if you're a student right now, right, you have an exam tomorrow, you have to study for it. It's urgent and important, right? So that's an example. What do you think is number 2, box number 2?
Well, if you go down, is not as important, but urgent.
Yes. You think that's box number 2?
Yeah. Cool. If I understood the matrix right.
Yeah. So not important, but urgent. Now, that's exactly where most of us get stuck. We all think that this is box number 2, but this should not be our box number 2. Our box number 2 should be not urgent, but important, because that is what sets our long-term vision. I'll give you an example. An example of something that's urgent but not important is like, especially today, we're so plugged into social media and email and phone and all of that. We see a notification, it feels urgent, so we immediately click on it. Right. But it's not important, you know, and you cluttering your mind with something that's not important but feels urgent is only going to make you feel like you're on edge all the time. 100%. Whereas if you set these goals, right, something that is not urgent but very important, as an artist, it's important for me to work on my craft. It's important for me to practice every day. It's important for me to have healthy habits, right? It's important for you to schedule, to plan things, to check yourself every few weeks, every few months. That is your second priority, and that should always be your second priority. And, you know, for a tangible form of that is let's say daily you want to create a to-do list or whatever it might be. Or daily you create the habit of working on your craft. And I believe that no matter what you do in life, you always have a craft. Right. For you, that might be managing this is part of the craft.
I haven't missed the morning like this since COVID started. Like I was sleeping in and trying to figure out what time. Now I'm like, 6 a.m. I'm up, hit the workout a little bit, get ready, you know, get all my stuff, gear plugged in, then I'm all in for the next hour.
Yeah, and it's crazy because it's like one of the things, I need to work out. That's not urgent. It's I need to work out today, for example. I don't need to do it right now. This is more urgent. But it's important because I know if I don't, I'm not setting up those healthy habits, right? So this habit formation block is second, and that's what changed my life. The third is, of course, Sorry, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So I know a lot of artists follow you and follow me too. Take this context and put it into your music career. So when you look at your day, your week, your month, there's a lot of
Yeah.
that reach out to me. They're like, I just don't know. Should I be creating content every day, practicing every day, singing every day? I don't know what goals to put aside. So maybe instead of giving all the secret sauces away, but like, how do you work on your music business and what kind of like consistent goals do you have?
I think it's really important to, whatever your system is, I'm somebody who needs to write things down, because if I don't write something down, it's like stuck in my brain. So I maintain this running list of things. I make sure that I have a vision, right? I'm not saying a vision board, because that's not something I think, like, I don't think you putting a picture of yourself on Vogue is good for a personality like me, because I'm somebody who feels like if I don't achieve that exact thing, I will feel less
Yeah,
than,
yeah.
you know? So I instead will have this long-term goal, which is like, where do I want to be in a year, generally speaking, in these areas of my life? And to put that more specifically, right? How many songs do I have want to released generally, or have worked on? What level do I want to have reached with my craft, and what do I need to get there? Is it daily practice? Is it this? Is it whatever? When you're an artist, right, there's multiple aspects to that. Some people think, oh, it's just me writing something today. I recorded a voice note and I'm done. But if you think about it, of course, today it doesn't necessarily feel like that with the online world. But as an artist, you're also a performer. Are you doing things to work on your performance craft? Whether that's being fit, doing some dance, working on your stage presence generally, you know, consuming things that are useful to learning. Like watching, if you're watching a stage performance of, I don't know, Beyonce, watch it for pleasure's sake, but also watch it to study it. You know, I think the biggest thing when you set a goal for yourself as a musician is to constantly be in a stage of learning. If you feel like you are saturated or at a, you know, at a level point that you're leveling off, that means that you have not explored a side of yourself that pushes you out of your comfort zone and you're not learning, right?
Yeah, that's what. Woo, bombs, my friend. Uh, you have got a beautiful fan base. Some of them, I know from watching your previous things, are just as soon as you go live, boom. For anybody getting new into the game, and it feels like such a daunting task today to start with a zero account, right?
Yeah.
Especially in a world where so much fakeness happens and people buy fans and all sorts of crazy shit. Uh, how does somebody stay motivated? Like even me, I know, like I throw an event and 150,000 people show up. I can't get my damn Facebook and Instagram account past 5,000. And it's not like we don't try, but it's like, at what point do you go, man, do I even pay attention to it? Do I have 10, 30? But then you know it impacts when you're trying to get a record deal. It impacts when you're trying to get sponsorship. How do you find the balance between paying attention to that stuff versus just being an artist? And can
I
you?
think it's always a balance, and it's something I'm learning. So let me give you my context. I actually joined social media. That's why it's hilarious to me that your daughter has a TikTok. I think it's beautiful. But I joined social media
I'm
when
gonna
I was
delete that part, by the way, off of this repost. I don't want it to be like Avanti says I could be on TikTok. I'm gonna have to delete it and edit it.
well, I don't mean necessarily TikTok, right? I mean, there's issues with multiple platforms for
Sure.
multiple reasons. But I think the fact that she's finding a source of self-expression,
Yeah,
however that might be, I mean, you
that's
may
that's
want
great.
to you may want to try to control it as much as you can, Satish, and I can understand that nuance as a parent, but today everybody's plugged in.
Yeah,
When I was 11, we weren't, because we just didn't have that, right? So it's just different. Like my first word was dada. My brother, who's only 4 years younger than me, his first word was W, because he was born in 2001, and everywhere, radio, TV, he would hear www.pbskids.org, www, like seriously, it's insane.
that is so cute.
So you just have to acknowledge those differences, you know, and move and I think teaching people healthy habits. I mean, I don't know how child friendly you want to keep this, but I think if you
It doesn't have to be.
okay, so if you think of these newer spaces, almost like the way in which you think about sex and how to talk with that about that with your children, right? The fact is, it's everywhere. And the fact is that if you don't talk to your children about that, you are not equipping them with the tools to understand the difference between good touch and bad touch and harassment and abuse and all these other things that they may be facing, right?
Yeah.
In a way that we may not know. In the same way, if everybody today has access to the internet in such an unfiltered way and all these apps, you can't deny people from being on them,
of course. Yeah.
because you know that that's going to cause rebellion. So how do you teach them healthy practices around it, right? And how do you kind of create that? So that's my mindset. But essentially, I joined Facebook when I was like 16 or 17 for literally the nerdiest reason ever, because I was part of a Model UN conference and I needed to create these like delegate invites. That's the only reason I joined Facebook at that age. I started Instagram when I, had a business page. Like for me, Instagram has always been a business thing. My Facebook page has always been a business thing. So for me, in fact, my early days of social media were very much a showcase platform. And I would use it as a way to be like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Oh, look, I released this. Oh, look, I did that. And I'm starting to unlearn those processes, because today, especially with the generation that is on these platforms, they don't give a shit about you constantly talking about what you do. They care who you are.
Yeah.
And they don't care who you are as, like, to them, to someone like me, right, who's always been told her whole life, oh, you've gotten to this school, you've done this, like, all of these things have made you who you are. I have to unlearn that, because it's like, these things are cool, but that's not who you are, and having or not having them don't make you any more or less worthy.
Yeah.
So how is it that you can connect, especially as an artist? Like, what is it that people will connect with? How can people connect? Can you show people sides of you that you enjoy? Can you be the real you, right? And that's so hard for me to understand, and I've had the beauty of having like more people in my life give me that advice and lean into that,
Do you consciously design how much of your content is spontaneous versus planned, fan engagement?
Yeah, so I would say I am somebody who does well with structure. So what I've learned is I will try out random things, and if it works, I will try to repeat it week by week. And if that works, I'll turn it into a series. I'll give you an example. Like I started in the lockdown, I'd been with my dad after so many years together, and somebody had requested for me to sing a song, a Punjabi song, and I was like, okay, I can sing it, but hey, it's gonna sound like shit if it's just me and a piano, because it needed that vibe. So I asked my dad if he would play the tabla with me, and we used to do that when I was much younger. We used to have father-daughter jams, and he's like, yeah, totally. He used to be so against social media before this. It was hilarious. We did it, and that one video did super well. So we're like, okay, let's try it again. We did it again, and people loved that, because they also loved seeing our dynamic,
Right.
And again and again and again. So now he looks forward to it. Literally right before this, we just recorded one, which I'm going to put up today. And it's become his favorite part. He's always like, oh, wait, so let's take the photo. Let's pose properly. And, he's super into it now.
No, look, there's massive bombs. I've got a 1 minute 30-second countdown, because Instagram does this thing. I also don't want to keep you too long. You have 35 seconds to give somebody one tip on when you're not inspired and it's just not a good day. How do you pick yourself up?
Find people that motivate you, have a conversation with them, and you will find that something they've said, like Satish was saying earlier, one piece of word or nugget can change your life and can change your framework.
Incredible. And anybody who's like, I don't know if this music thing is for me, I'm passionate, but I just don't know the formula, what would you tell them?
There is no formula. Everyone has to work it out for themselves. You can study case studies, but unless you truly feel like you have the path, it's not going to happen. What I would encourage you to do is professionalize it and think of it as a business. And when you do that, you'll have some objectivity from yourself, whereby you can both work on the craft as well as see the surrounding things.
Amazing. I feel like I need a part 2 with you. Thank you so much for joining me. There's a ton of value bombs. I can't even thank you enough. You're going to be in the book for sure. It's going to be crazy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, man. We're doing a bunch of cool music stuff coming up in August. I'd love for you to come back and join us for another session.
Love to.
And I will promise to learn at least a sentence of Hindi next time we speak.
Yeah. I'll try to learn Tamil so we can reciprocate.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a brilliant day. I love you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay,
bye.
bye.